So yeah, it's a brewery up in Sonoma County called Moonlight Brewing Company. Been there forever. And they're most famous for their a beer called Death and Taxes, which is a black lager. So it's just a lager. It's like a very dry, light, crisp beer, but the brewer puts a little bit of what's called black patent malt. It's a grain that is heavily roasted. It really doesn't add any flavor to the beer, but it basically dyes it black or nearly pitch black. So when you pour it, it looks like you're pouring like a big dry Irish stout, like a big Guinness or something, but it's a Pilsner. Or it's basically just a super light, dry lager, but it's just dark, which is odd. But he made this one, the Reality Check Pilsner, which we love for a couple of reasons, but as a beer geek. So in beer, this style of Pilsner from the Czech Republic, traditionally it uses one of the noble hops, which is called Saaz, S-A-A-S, or Z, S-A-Z. It's just a type of hops, and it gives a very particular flavor. So if you've ever had, not Trumer, I'm trying to think of one of the beers out there that you would have had that's like a Czech Pilsner, that it's a pretty common, comes in a green bottle, everyone's pretty familiar with it. If I pointed out, you'd know what it was. Anyway, he does this beer, but without using that type of hops. He uses a combination of others to get the exact same flavor. But he's like this massive, like sciencey beer geek sort of guy. And so he has, and so he like the first time I met him, I'm like, oh, does it have like Saaz hops? And all he goes, nope, I don't use that. I'm like, you just blew my mind. Like, how do you do it? Like, I was still kind of early in homebrewing, and I'm like, how do you do it? And he goes, well, and just waxes poetic about hops for a while. I'm like, this man's a genius. It was fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was in like heaven. I was in complete beer nerd heaven. I'm like, please, Brian, tell me more. Please learn me of the ways of beer.
I always enjoy that. Like, especially when someone's like, that's their profession, whether it's beer or wine or spirits of any kind, or I will say, people that can mix drinks really well. So this holiday season, there was a drink that I made that I had been wanting to make for a while, and a friend of mine was making it at a holiday party, and I was like, oh, I'm totally gonna make these for Christmas, and they ended up being the thing that everybody wanted to drink. And have you heard of a paper plane?
No, I have not.
Yeah, paper plane. What's the guy's name? Something Ross. He was from the Milk and Honey Bar in New York.
Okay.
He's like a great guy. He's built a bunch of, I want to say it's like Sam Ross, but I could be wrong on that. He makes a bunch of drinks, and this was a drink that he made in 2010, and it's an easy drink to make because it's only got 4 parts to it. But it's absolutely delicious. And that's what I mean by like what you're saying. If I run into someone who knows their way around like homebrew, or knows their way around beer, or knows their way around, I'm 100% there. And the thing with the drink that I made that was very popular in Christmas was paper plane, and it's got 4 parts. It has 1 part, you can do it in ounces if you'd like. 1 ounce bourbon of your choice, 1 ounce lemon juice, 1 ounce Amaro Nonino, and then 1 ounce Aperol. And it ends up becoming this kind of like grapefruit color, and that's the best way to describe it. It's like an alcoholic grapefruit. It is really tart and oddly like bitter, and if you heard me say that, you'd be like, I don't want to drink that, Ryan. But it is absolutely delicious, and I recommend anyone, especially if you can find the Amaro Nonino, which is actually I find really difficult to find. I cannot recommend it enough. It was the drink that we drank at my Christmas party with my family, and even on the New Year. And a friend of mine even made a variation on the paper plane, called it a red eye, and he used rye whiskey instead of bourbon.
Oh, I love rye whiskey. Absolutely love rye whiskey. Oh my gosh. Oh, dude, that sounds like so much fun. Like I've never done I'm not a big cocktail person in general. I have them every now and again, but I appreciate a good cocktail when I have one. Like I was in Reno. We talked about this right after I got back. I was in Reno a couple of months ago. I think it was back in November. Seeing friends I hadn't seen in a long time. I spent the weekend there just kind of hanging out. And if anyone's been to Reno, it used to just be all casinos and gaming or whatever. It was just kind of there. But they've changed in the section they call Midtown, which is basically the Truckee River as it runs through downtown Reno. There's a road called South Virginia that runs south. Go figure, south. And south of the Truckee River, there's a whole section they called Midtown where they basically revamped it. All kinds of bars, restaurants, breweries, everything you can think of. It was amazing. Actually, there was like these big, beautiful, like light and glass structures that made up these roundabouts on the road to slow traffic down quite a bit. That were like, it felt like I was in the Gaslamp district of San Diego. Like it was
right
not the place I remember. And I don't remember the name of the bar. It was like something for rum, like R for Rum or whatever it was called. Was this bar I went to with a friend of mine, and we had these cocktails that were like. I don't ever go. I mean, you can get whatever you want to drink, but they had these signature cocktails, like 10 of them. I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. I bought one. It was fantastic. It was absolutely amazing. Yeah. But it's just not something I just go to because there's so much sugar in them.
Yes.
I'm really sensitive to sugar. Like I can't drink sweet drinks. Like iced tea has to be completely without sugar at all in there for me. Anything that is sweet, like I can't drink sodas. Drinking a sip or two of soda, and I just feel like my mouth feels bad. Like I just don't. Sugar stuff just doesn't work for me anymore. So having cocktails has to be kind of a rarity, but they were amazing. I default to this so much more often because I don't know. I do like good wine. I mean, I love good whiskeys in cocktails, and I appreciate really good wine. I don't drink it very often, but I do appreciate it. But I find myself, if I want to sit down and have a session, like a couple of drinks and just hang out, I just go to a good lager or something else that was dry and crisp that's not going to make my palate feel like fatigued after I finish drinking.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, by the way, welcome back, Rob and Gorov. Thanks for the notes on the Happy New Year.
Yeah, guys, thanks for being here.
And I will say, welcome back to the drink chat. The
Kessel chat's a multi-dimensional. It's like a multiverse of. It's our multiverse of streams.
Whole thing that happened on that Kessel run. So,
a lot happened.
I will say I'm not usually like someone who's like, oh, like let's mix the spirits around, especially like as you said, like I don't like sweet things. I'm a big bourbon drinker. I love 1792. It's funny because it's like I've got some Larceny down here, some Lost Republic that's over here. I love a really good bottle of Scotch. I have the Glenlivet, and all of the Glens. I'm never gonna reject a Glen, but I will say that I really enjoy a bitter or tart. That's I think the thing that I like in flavor. It's just like how with wines, like I don't like a sweet wine, which no. I'm betraying my Portuguese heritage, right, by saying that. But I love like earthy, like I'm sorry, that's gonna now I'm starting to get into the weeds here. I will say Gorov's got a good line here about what if the bar that serves that blue drink that Luke was drinking at Uncle Owen's house.
Dude.
I will say I'm 100% having that drink in Galaxy's Edge.
By the way,
I'm sure they could have made it alcoholic.
Garov, right up, you can see it right there-ish on my shelf, and Brian's got his too, is the cup that you can buy in Batu or Galaxy's Edge while you're at Disneyland that has the blue milk. So you can buy blue milk and walk around on a strap and carry it and drink it. And they do make a cocktail, many of them, but they make a cocktail that is kind of based off of the blue milk in what is it called? Uga's Cantina. It's actually fantastic. I was surprised. We bought this and I'm like, you know what? I want to have the blue milk because of course I want to have it. First time at Disneyland in 20 years, we're going to do this. It was not that sweet. It was basically, it's just based off of coconut milk with some sort of additional sweetener to it.
Delicious.
Yeah, it was really good. It was not that sweet at all. It was almost like a watered down, consistency was like a watered down slushy. So it wasn't just straight liquid. But it wasn't very sweet. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
All right.
And by the way, like good on them because it gets really hot there during the summer. And the last thing I think anybody wants to have on a really hot day is a glass of milk.
Right?
And they like made it delicious. I was there in August and we were all hot. Just like, I mean, our shoes were sticking to the ground. It was so hot. And it was absolutely delicious to have those, the blue milk. And then they also had the green milk.
That's right.
Both of those were, both options were available. And the reason why Jeff's got that bottle, I got that bottle, is that you can actually take it and walk around the park with it.
Yes.
And it's an insulated bottle, which is really nice because it does kind of keep it cold while you're walking around.
Yep, absolutely. All right, shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
Let's do this. Everybody, welcome back to the Castle Chat. It has been weeks. We've been on holiday vacation with our company shut down for a little bit, and Ryan and I both took a little extra time off too. So, enjoying the holidays with families. But it's good to be back here.
It is.
And now I'm going to do the thing we should probably do each time because I haven't really been thinking about it. But if you're here and you haven't already, go down there and hit that subscribe button. We would love it if you subscribe. I know everyone sees the posts that we do on social, all the different socials everywhere, but subscribe. And also, if you're here, could you please give us a big thumbs up on the video? We really appreciate it. I'm really trying to put an effort into better use of the YouTube tools, and those thumbs ups really, really help get the videos bumped up in the algorithm so people see them, because we'd love more people to enjoy the show with us. So, and some cool news for tonight that is a first time. So you all know that we stream to YouTube and to Facebook, and we also stream to Twitter. We have done that for a while. We added Twitch some time ago, and we're testing that one out. I don't know if this is really Twitch is really the right platform for us, but we'll see. But tonight is our first night, I hope it's working, of streaming live to LinkedIn. And I don't know if it's working. The broadcast shows that it is there. I hope people can watch it. So I'm testing that one out. We'll see what happens. Doesn't look like it's actually up and running just yet, but that's okay. We're going to test it, but we have the ability now to stream to LinkedIn directly. So
right on.
We'll see what happens.
And I will say, good to see. I see Rich has joined us. I'm sorry that he was on the other stream waiting.
Sorry about that.
I was super excited to see you here, Rich. I hope that you had a really good holiday break, and that all is going well where you are. So glad to see everybody back.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Rich. We appreciate it, buddy. Awesome. So we're back. We got all kinds of cool stuff to talk about. We're gonna get into it. I did the calls to action, join us, subscribe, all the fun, cool stuff. But we were talking earlier about this, and we thought we'd make this a little bit more loose because we're just getting back in the holidays. There's so much to talk about. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't start with one of two things that we should really get into. The first one is up above over there, the holidays with Boba Fett. The book of Boba Fett dropped 2 weeks ago, or last week.
Yeah.
We had episode 2 this week, and we should talk about this. We're definitely going to talk about it.
I've got thoughts. You have
a lot of thoughts.
I'm really excited about this show. Like, I'm really excited about the show. I think there is a big story that they're trying to tell.
Yes.
And I think, because I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are on this, because I will say, as I'm sure you might have seen, there's been a bit of like a mixed reaction from the fan base regarding this show. It hasn't been like with The Mandalorian, where Mandalorian came out and people were like, oh yeah, like I'm 100% a Mandalorian and Baby Yoda all the way. But this show has, I feel like there is a good contingent. I don't think it's split, but I think there's a good contingent that's like doesn't know what to think yet.
Yeah.
So I'm eager to hear what you think. I'd love to hear. It dropped December 29th. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm gonna get into it in a second. We're gonna do it in just a second. I was troubleshooting while you were talking. I was troubleshooting LinkedIn to see if I can get that to work. There's something going on with it. I don't know what's happening with it. We'll figure it out. But so we're going to do the Book of Boba Fett first, and then also we're going to try to get to Star Wars: The High Republic. So Ryan, I don't think has read. You haven't really read any of them yet. So
no.
That's okay. What we're going to do is talk a bit about what the High Republic is, the backstory behind the High Republic, and kind of what's happening with that, because the High Republic just celebrated its 1-year anniversary. So books and comics and all these stories have been just shoving into our faces for the last year, and it feels like they've just been flying. Actually, I did a TikTok yesterday. I don't have one of the books sitting here. These are other books, other Star Wars books I have to find room for. But I did a TikTok holding on these books, walking to my bookshelves that you can kind of see back here, and I'm like, where do I put these books? I think I need a bigger boat. I don't think it's gonna work. So we'll talk a bit about the High Republic too, because there's a lot going on there. There's a ton more coming this next year. It's awesome.
I did watch the anniversary special because we just crossed over the first anniversary of when the High Republic started. And if there was something that I really liked seeing, it was there is this great crop of authors and people that are outside of the Star Wars universe, or typically have been outside of the Star Wars universe, they've brought in to really help to craft these stories. And I like the fact that they're looking at this long term. If you were back in the Legends days with me, with old days, like going through your Star Trek novels, there was a lot of one-offs. There was a lot of things that, even though it was going through Lucas Publishing or Lucasfilm Publishing, whatever they were calling it at that time, they weren't necessarily planned storylines. And I got to say, I like the fact that they're really putting a lot of emphasis on, we're devoted to these characters, we're devoted to this time period, we're really going to be building it up. And that's not to say that that wasn't happening in the Legends era. I remember those series happening in the Legends era, but then you'd go on a run, and unless it was tied to the main characters like Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, C-3PO, if it didn't happen to them, Mara Jade, if it didn't happen to them, then it didn't really matter anymore. Jason Solo, Janiyah Solo, all those people. And so I really like that they're really invested in kind of making this happen. But I can see, by the way, Jeff, there's a bunch of people saying spoilers, don't want to see the spoilers for Boba Fett. I will not do spoilers.
We will do our best.
I will be talking, though, about how the episodes themselves are formatted.
Yes.
And why? Anyway, I'm sorry.
No, you're totally right.
Go on ahead.
I saw Garov say that, and I think others have said that too. So yeah, Ryan, you're totally right. We're going to do our best. What we try to focus on when we talk about these sorts of shows is we don't really want to talk as much about the individual topics and what happened in the episode as far as like the literal actions that occurred by each character. What we're more interested in generally is sort of the editing, the backstory. What did they focus on? What were the themes they sort of centered around in the story overall, to try to give you some context if you're just still going to watch the episode, so you have a little more context about what kind of to expect and what a different lens to look at it from. But we're going to really try to avoid talking about too many of the specific plot lines and threads that are being tugged on throughout the episode. So we'll definitely do that. And also, we have a new person on the podcast, Lindsay. So cool that you're here.
Oh yeah, hello, welcome.
We've been Lindsay and I have been following each other on Instagram and other social media for a while. We have a mutual friend who's both of our tattoo artists, which is kind of cool. Actually, her really good friend of mine as well, tattoo artist, did this piece for me. So super cool, Lindsay. Thank you for being here. It's awesome to have you here.
Actually, Jeff, I gotta say, I was expecting to come back into this episode and expect to see some brand new artwork.
I know.
On your. Oh,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It'll be a couple weeks. So on the 26th, I have an appointment to get. I think it's the 26th to get my other hand done. And this one is awesome. I mean, it's my second Star Wars tattoo. My first one's on my side over here. My second Star Wars tattoo. My third one is like 2 weeks later. But it's my second Star Wars tattoo. And even more fun than that is super good friend of the show and has been on here a bunch of times, Brandon, who's been a guest star on the show several different times. He designed. He's actually does a lot of graphic art and other work. He designed the piece that's going on my hand. So I took that piece and some inspiration. It's some art that is inspired by an episode or an arc within Star Wars Rebels, where Ezra is on Lothal. Kanan has, if you haven't, I'm sorry, spoiling Rebels here. Something happens with Kanan. Anyway, Ezra's on Lothal, and they find this temple, this hidden Jedi temple that they've excavated, and they find this mural of the ones, the father, the son, and the daughter. And it's very circular and beautiful, and there's a whole amazing story arc around it. And so he took that and created this imagery that's going to go on the back of my hand as a result. So, super cool. So that's happening in a couple of weeks. And then like the week after, I'm getting my knuckles tattooed. And everyone's going to see it, but my knuckles are getting tattooed. It'll be backwards, so it'll read when you look at it. It's going to be on each of my fingers. There will be a symbol in Galactic Basic that reads Star Wars. So it's literally going to say my knuckles are going to say Star Wars, but it'll be in Galactic Basic.
Oh wow!
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm so excited.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really, really cool.
Awesome. Well, everyone, let's jump into it. So why don't we start with the Book of Boba Fett, because there's just so much to do here, and you had some thoughts. So, dude, Lectern is yours. Have at it.
Okay. So I am going to do this. I am going to keep this spoiler free. And I am going to say I entered Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett, with really like not a lot of crazy like, oh, I'm expecting all of these things out of this series. I came into the series without a lot of expectations, and I would say the main reason why is because I was surprised that they were even going to do this. Like I'm not going to lie, there was a part of me that was like, oh, I can't believe that they're really going to and I'm trying to fix my lighting here because for whatever reason it just changed. I didn't know they were going to do the Book of Boba Fett. I didn't know that all of those things were going to come to pass. And coming out of episode 2, I'm going to say that I have high hopes. And that might be different than what a lot of fans feel like. I know that a lot of people are kind of thinking, gosh, I don't know yet how to feel about this. But I think that's because there is a narrative thread that I feel like I got the feeling like I'm getting slow played right now. That I'm getting just drips and drips and drips of a story at a time. They have this really interesting narrative thread for people who haven't seen this, and this isn't a spoiler, where you're getting what's happening in the present that's being run parallel with what has happened in the past. Like how, basically telling that gap between Boba Fett falling into the Sarlacc pit to now. And so you're getting this kind of split narrative. And I think that's important because Boba Fett is a largely blank character. Boba Fett is a blank canvas, and he's a rather ruthless character when last we met him in the movies. And so to really see him now, I think the trick to it is giving this character background, giving this character a narrative arc, and allowing this character to grow. And because they were just a really great side character. And so and again, try not to get into spoilers on all of this. But what I think they've done is they've projected and built up a lot of this characterization. And why that worked okay in The Mandalorian, and why I think some fans are having a problem here, is I think a lot of people came in with expectations as who Boba Fett is. And a lot of people had their expectations on what Boba Fett was going to be like, and what the narrative structure was going to be like. And let's just see this guy be a gangster and just like be ruthless and get going. And instead, we're getting this very character driven. It's not as action packed as I think a lot of people were expecting. It's very character driven narrative story. And what I think we're really getting, and Rich asked me to relate this to a Star Trek character, I would say it reminds me a lot of Roga Danar from the episode of what was it? Not the Wounded, but Roga Danar from Star Trek: Next Generation, where you have a character who has been wounded by the things that they have done and are now having to come to terms with that. And so yeah, I think I just think that this is not the show people were expecting. And this is not the characterization that people were expecting. And if there's a movie that I could relate this to, it actually reminds me a lot. And I know this can sound stupid, but it reminds me a lot of like Godfather 2, where you're getting like the Don Corleone backstory. Like you're getting here he was as a boy in Sicily. Here he is as a young man in New York. Here he is as a rising crime boss. And I think over the course of several episodes, I think that's how it's going to be. And it's not going to be so much of a shoot 'em up, which is what I think people were expecting, or like a bounty hunter's delight type of story. But anyway, it's been great seeing a lot of surprise characters appear, great seeing additional huts appear, great seeing a comic book character that I don't want to spoil, that appeared in episode 2. I was blown away to see that. But I have enjoyed this, even though I know it's not what people have expected.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. When I was the first episode, I'll be honest, the first episode, I didn't know what this show was really going to be like. And when I heard the title, The Book of Boba Fett, it unfortunately, thankfully, I should say, it gave me a vision in my mind that didn't make the show appealing to me. So I'm glad that I was going to give it a chance anyway. But the term The Book of Boba Fett had a very sort of ecclesiastical sort of feel to me. It felt like, and now the Book of Boba Fett, like, so almost like they were going to be reading from scripture or something to that effect. It's kind of how that came across. And I was a little worried that it might be turned into sort of a, like here's the rules to life by Boba Fett. I'm like, I know that's not what's going to happen, but the title, like, I'm like, what are you trying to get across by the book of? Like, I don't know, something about that. It didn't really jive with me, and I couldn't really understand what the purpose of that title was. I'm like, well, forget it. Let's just watch the show and see what happens. And of course, each one's like a chapter. Okay, fine. But I will say, watching the show, the first episode, I was confused. I watched it, I'm like, there's a lot of jumping around, which it's not a bad thing. But by the end of the first episode, I told my wife when we finished watching it that I enjoyed it because it was clearly going to be something very different. The show overall is going to be something very different than what anyone expected or could probably have expected.
Yep.
That said, the first episode definitely felt like they didn't quite know where they needed to be telling their story. And I think probably, now that you've kind of helped me understand this, I think that in the first episode, a lot of what we saw, or a lot of what I felt like was disjointed in how the storytelling worked, probably could have been some editing changes that would have made that work a little bit better. Almost like, I mean, they tried to do it a bit in episode 1 where Boba keeps going back to not continuously goes back to the back to tank, but we see him in the back to tank remembering things, cutscenes, flashbacks. And I think that can work, but to me, it felt disjointed in how they did it. It felt there was no point where he was reflecting on something. It was almost like he's here, and now we see a backstory, and then we're back to the main story. It's like, well, but what triggered us in the thought process of the actions of Boba to then need to see this piece of his backstory that led him here? Like, they make sense, and I get it, but it almost felt like, I'm going to play a little bit of the main story, and then we'll just cut to something. It's like, but why? We'll just cut here. But why here? Like, why not in 2 steps? Why not at this other point where something just happened, and let's cut to a point that is relevant in the backstory to this, that kind of tells you, like, oh, he's acting this way because this other thing happened. That didn't feel like it played out that way to me in the first episode. So it left me feeling a little like they didn't quite have that down. But episode 2, to me, felt much more in line with, we're going to tell you a main story, and we are going to explain how he got to this point, because the getting to this point is as important, if not more important, than the main story that is going on. The main story is interesting and surely will develop out and tune and change over the, and become more prominent. But what happened to him to get him to this point is very clearly as important as the main thread that is occurring here. And I really love that about the second episode. I walked away from that just having to really sit back and think a lot about, what is this character going to do? Clearly, this character is not the character that everyone expected after the tiny amount of time that he had on screen in the original movies and the amount of time he's had in comic books. This is not the character that anyone expected, I think, for a couple of reasons. One is, we've never seen this part of this character, what he is going through right now, what had happened to him on Tatooine with the Sarlacc pit, all the stuff that we know and love. What happened between that point and what we have been seeing through the TV show, The Mandalorian, and now his own show? This is all new territory. All the stuff that happened before is a younger man doing younger man things, being a bounty hunter, all that happy jazz. He's a different person now. He's aged. He's doing something different. He's behaving different. And I think that's really interesting because it lets us see, it almost lets you see a demarc between youth and middle age, where you don't know, you've had experiences, but you don't know how to put those. When someone says, when you go to interview for a job, well, I think you need to have more experience. The way I like to think about that is like, if you can talk through the experiences you have, because at the end of the day, experience just means I have encountered experiences. I've literally had experiences that taught me here. Now, can I understand that these things have taught me the experiences I've had have taught me a set of rules that I can, or things I can then live by? Well, that happens as you get closer to middle age. That's not a bad or a good thing. That's just that's how life works. As you grow up, you have more experiences. And as you get towards the middle of your life, you start to be able to coalesce those together to realize, oh, this is really how I should approach life. And to me, this show is really starting to show that everything Boba did up to the point of the Sarlacc is almost this demarc of, I was this person, I had experiences, and I just went about stuff, and I can't do that anymore for a very definitive reason. I was in the belly of a Sarlacc being digested by a creature for 1,000 years, and I got my way out. Now what the hell do I do? Like, now what happens? Now who am I? What do I like? I feel like the movie. If anyone's seen the movie Clerks by Kevin Smith, I wasn't even supposed to be here today.
Yeah, I was supposed to be here today. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I actually think that Boba Fett is a character that this story, and by the way, I felt the same way with you about the title, like the Book of Boba Fett. I remember thinking, anytime I see the Book of Boba Fett, it was a dark and stormy night, or the Book of Blank. It's the dark and stormy night of titles. It is the Webster's Dictionary speech introduction of titles.
Looking at the list of intros you can pick. How about that one today?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that would have been worse is the Chronicles of Boba Fett. We don't need something like that, but I understand what they're trying to do now from a narrative perspective, and I'm willing to give it 2 more episodes, honestly, because I still think the wheels haven't really made the traction that they need to make. But I think that's because of 2 big problems. So much background and stories intersect with Boba Fett. The prequels have all of this background with Boba Fett. The Clone Wars introduce all of this background with Boba Fett. Boba Fett is just a character with a handful of lines in Empire and no lines in Jedi, outside of the scream that he yells.
Disintegration.
Yeah, exactly. The as you wish. He's worth more to me alive. All of those things really mean that Boba Fett is just, it's funny because I've got like this Boba Fett action figure here, which was, I think, from 1997. And on the back, they've got all of this background on who Boba Fett is and what type of, he's a Mandalorian. He wears the armor of a Mandalorian super commando. This is even before episode 2 came out. You know what I mean? And what's funny about that is that Boba Fett comes with all of this stuff from Legends, all of this story fabric. And I think that gets in the way. And it's what makes something like a Mandalorian or even the High Republic series work a little bit more easily, because you're able to really cut these characters out of whole cloth. And you're able to have them build and set up rules that you just like right away. Okay, here's the Mandalorian. He lives underground in the sewers with the other Mandalorians, and he won't take his helmet off. And he obviously had some type of trauma as a child, which forged him just as he's trying to forge his armor. So it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that, I can get into that. Boba Fett, though, comes with all of this backstory, and that's, I think, one of the things that hurts it. But the other thing that affects it, so one, you got all this backstory, all of this like story fabric that you have to deal with, that fans are trying to deal with. And then you've got this other thing, which is the actor who plays him, Tamora Morrison. He's great. If you want to see a really great movie that he did, it's not episode 1. It was When We Were Warriors. I think that's what it is. Actually, the woman who voices Ton Wee on Camino, she's also she plays his wife, I believe, and it is just a really harrowing movie. It's a hard movie to watch, but he's a really great actor. And I don't think Tamora Morrison is really interested in making a shoot 'em up style Boba Fett show. And I don't think they were trying to do a Mandalorian clone either. I really think this is a story about someone who is finally coming into their own, or finally defining themselves rather than letting the universe define them. And that's really hard because outside of this fiction, we as a fan base have defined Boba Fett. And so it's a little bit difficult. And I think that's why when they were trying to write around those things, introduce all of these story concepts, these character concepts, and they shoved them all out. And I think that's why it's like, from a visual, like watching the show, it's hard to follow. It's not easy, normally you have an A plot and a B plot, and you kind of move between the two. This was telling like parallel stories that were not connected, and it was hard to kind of see what was going on.
It's so interesting that you describe it that way. So I just, in addition to I'm reading Fallen Star, which is the latest Star Wars: The High Republic novel. I'm reading that in hard book form. That's inside the house. And I'm also listening to the Witcher series. So I decided I've watched The Witcher on Netflix. I'm like, I need to read these books. So I finished Last Wish, which is the first book in that series, a few days ago. And I just bought Sword of Destiny this morning and started listening to The Witcher. It's exactly the same thing you're describing. They're like, it's hard. The first book is really hard to follow because you have to just kind of go with it, because there is a thread. It's not even a main thread where like, he's at this location talking to somebody, interacting over a couple of days, and then tells a bunch of stories, and you have to follow the stories. It's like, yes, but that only happens for this part of the book, and otherwise it's just random. It feels like random stories of the character Geralt of Rivia throughout this book. Finally, towards the end of the book, you kind of get to hear a story that really does have a conclusion and kind of cleans up the book. But the second book even starts with like a whole other story that's just kind of happened. We just drop into Geralt's life and something is happening to him. It's kind of like watching the TV show. Like, you just kind of drop in and stuff's happening. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of like, yeah, what are you doing here? Like, what's the point of this story? And I felt like even in the second episode, less so in the second episode, but still in it, that second episode, to your point, it felt very much like, I'm intrigued. I'm interested to see where you're going with this story and what you're going to do with it, with his character, to all the points you made. And you being the directors, but you specifically, Ryan, and what you just said, that what they're doing with his character and how they're turning, what they're making of his character. I'm really interested to see what they're doing. He is clearly not going to be the Boba Fett we saw in the Clone Wars or any of these other series. He is a different person now, for whatever those reasons. We're starting to learn what those reasons are. But it's still hard to follow because the way they're editing things together does make it disjointed. There's clearly a Favreau, and the others clearly have a purpose for what they're doing. So I do trust them that they have a purpose and it's going to come out in a way that is meaningful. But I will say it's sort of a devil's advocate thing where I'm watching this and I'm a little frustrated because I'm like, I'm having a hard time following it, and I trust that they're doing the right thing and they're going to get a story together. But kind of playing the devil's advocate, I'm also like, maybe that is the point. Maybe what they're doing here is really trying to do something very different that is not going to conclude the way that so many people kind of expect it to conclude. It's not going to, I don't think it's actually going to end up as a clean story that's like, and he succeeded and he becomes the new guy on Tatooine, the new daimyo on Tatooine who now runs all the stuff and he's cool. Like, obviously that's too easy. That's not going to happen. That's not how stories ever play out in reality. And to what you said, I think it's a really interesting thread that we can tug on to find out like what really does happen to a person when they've decided to be something else, or rather to decide I've forcefully been shaken. The bonds of my life have now been shaken off of me forcefully. Like I didn't get a choice in this. It was forced to happen. Now what? Who
Yeah.
am I, and what does that mean for me, and decisions I get to make now that this is all I have. And we start to see it. I'm sorry, Gaurav. I'm going to try not to spoil this too much, but there's a couple scenes in the second episode where he is he is given an opportunity that could for most people lead to like, I'm going to bounce, I'm out of here, and he doesn't take it. Matter of fact, he actually comes back to the situation that he was involved with before. And the context you'll see in the episode, I don't need to say it here, but it's interesting to me because when I watched it, it didn't dawn on me until after the episode. I'm like, he didn't just come back. He came back with a reverence. He came back with an appreciation, like an appreciation for what he had. Not, I promised you, and my honor is my honor, and I'm here because I told you I. No, he came back for a reason. Like, he came back because he said he would, and because something there is in this situation is drawing him back to the situation. And it's simple. It's not a complicated situation, but something there is drawing him back. And by the end of the episode, you realize, oh, it actually really works towards his character, like as a character, his personal development, who he is as a human, as a person. It really works to show you who he is and what is happening with him, like how he is changing, even in the context of one episode that we get to watch. And I think that's really fascinating. But I think it does mean that, to your point, we're going to have to watch at least 2 more episodes to really, if anyone is expecting to see a show where it's just going to pick up, I think it's going to need a couple more episodes before that sort of thing really happens, because it will have to happen at some point, because otherwise you won't keep an audience very long. But I think it's still going to take a couple more episodes to get there. I think there's still too much happening that Boba needs to reflect on that happened to him in order to take advantage of the situation that's in front of him, or to handle the situation in front of him. And I think that's going to require these flashbacks to show us, what did he learn to be able to take care of this? Because his time as a bounty hunter is not really what's informing what he's doing on Tatooine right now. Like, it gave him a certain set of skills. Like, it gave him that set of skills that he needs to like protect himself, but it did not give him the skills at all to be a politician and to work with people and to build relationships. Like, that's almost literally the opposite of what he did when he was a bounty hunter. And so now he's got to do that. And that's going to take some reflection back on the stuff that happened to him when he first got to Tatooine and came out of the Sarlacc pit, and the events that we're seeing here. So I think that's what I'm excited to watch, is like, how do they develop this character out in that way to learn from those things?
Yeah, and I guess and it's funny because I can see Gorov's comment about, I thought Book was a reference to a hit list. I would have loved a Boba Fett Kill Bill series. Heck, I would have loved a Book of Boba Fett where the flashbacks, we see the ruthless Boba Fett, going out and getting work done, while we also, like, I think you've got this great opportunity where the actor that played the kid Boba Fett is now like in his late 20s. And it's like, why not divide that out? Like, why not have your flashbacks by the kid that played Boba Fett, who's now like a grown-up adult, and then your today Boba Fett, which is Tamora Morrison. I mean, I'm all in favor of that. I think that there was a lot of fun things that they could have done with this, but I think that because of the type of actor and the type of story that I feel like fit with Tamora Morrison, and the fact that they wanted to make the honorable anti-hero, which is it's hard to make Boba Fett an honorable anti-hero, because Boba Fett is not an honorable dude. He's not someone where it was like honor among thieves. That really isn't Boba Fett in all of the storylines that we know of him. He was looking out for number one all the time. And so it doesn't really fit the character. And so what they had to do with these episodes and with his background is to show him as a man who now has community. And a person who has community is someone who can't think only for themselves. And that's why he saves Shand in the desert. That's why he's doing these things, is now he's a man of community, and now he's an honorable bad guy. He's got a code that he lives by. To quote Michael K. Williams, a man's got to have a code. And so now we have Boba Fett with a code. He's honor bound, and he's doing these things. But I think that they're working so hard to tell the audience this is why he's like this now. This is where all this background's coming from. This is why he is now a man who want or a character, not a character that wants to build versus a character that's just in it for himself. I think they're really beating the audience over the head with it, but I think it's in a way where Godfather 2 is an amazing movie, but that thing is like 3 hours long. And that's because you spend so much time back in the past learning a story that honestly I didn't need until I watched it and was like, oh wow, it's so great to see how did Vito Corleone become Vito Corleone. It's one of the few times where a prequel really made sense. Like I never watched Darth Vader and thought, man, I really wonder what Anakin Skywalker was like as a little kid. I never thought that. And I surely didn't see Boba Fett and think, oh man, I really wish that I could find out how he was when he was a little kid. I was never thinking that. I was never thinking that. That's what I got in the prequels, whatever.
Yeah, and well, we got, and with Boba Fett specifically, we got a lot of his bounty hunter ways as a kid, especially in the Clone Wars animated series, because there were several arcs over a couple different seasons, if I remember right, where we get to see Boba leading his own crew of bounty hunters.
Yes.
And even though he's a kid, these bounty hunters, these grown-ups, like, they follow him. Aura Singh and Bosk and sorry, there was remember some of the others. Like even Cad Bane, I wouldn't say is intimidated by him, but definitely takes him seriously. Like doesn't treat him like he's just a child that he can dismiss. Like actually does treat him seriously. So we've actually got to see that character, and I like. Personally, I love the idea that you just came up with, and that would be really interesting to watch as maybe like an outtake or a deleted scene that they filmed, but maybe it didn't work out right. But I do like that they like. Go ahead.
But Jeff, if Disney uses it, I'm just you all are listening. They stole that idea from me.
Yeah, I heard that's exactly what I heard. Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. No, it's all good. I was just saying that like I think we're actually personally I think we're good with. Or they've done a good job already setting the stage for who Boba was when he was younger and how he got to the point of the Boba Fett that we knew and loved in the comics and Bounty Hunter. We saw him as a kid in the Clone Wars and how that kind of developed or set the stage a bit for like why he becomes sort of the more ruthless or like this is just what I do and that's it and I don't have emotion. I don't work with a crew and I'm just done later on in his life. So I think it's almost like the adolescent angsty kid stage. I'm just here to get my paycheck and this is what I do stage. And now we get to see the late middle-aged stage of, yeah, but what now, dude? But now,
what am I leaving behind?
What am I leaving behind?
What community do I have?
Yeah.
And oddly, and I don't think this is much of a spoiler because I feel like if you've seen even a trailer for it, you'll know that the Tusken Raiders are featured very heavily in this show.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's such a weird choice. I don't think, and I always try to project myself if I was in that writer's room. Like, would I have said, you know who we're going to humanize? The Tusken Raiders. I don't know if that would have been my call. But it's really interesting. I like how they used them in The Mandalorian. I loved that episode, the Marshall episode, which I think is the first episode of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And how the Tusken Raiders do have all of that, kind of grunting talk, but that they also have this like sign language, which looks very developed. I loved that. I loved all of the world building of the Tusken Raiders. To me, that was really interesting. But I saw another reviewer talk about this when it comes to what they're doing with the Tusken Raiders and even Boba Fett, is there is a very like Fremen like element to what they're doing here, that Boba is an outsider who is now inside of their community. I will say that the Tusken Raiders there's a really surprising choice, and every time they keep building in that expanded world, I always think, man, it makes Anakin look that much worse. Every time they're like, you know who we need to humanize? Let's go and humanize the Tusken Raiders. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting character choice. I thought that was an interesting narrative that they're really building on. And I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying that the Tusken Raiders are in the show. But yeah, I just think that it's a really interesting thing that they're trying to do. It's a really hard thing that they're trying to do, which is redefine a character that we all thought we already knew.
Mm-hmm.
That's very hard to do. Welcome to The Last Jedi, and the reason why people had a big problem with the Luke Skywalker that they met in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Because we all had an idea of what Luke Skywalker was like, and then we went and saw The Last Jedi, and you see a Luke Skywalker who's in fact dealing with failure. And that is not how we like to see our heroes.
It's fascinating.
We like to think of our heroes, going off into the sunset.
It's
which he ends up doing.
It's fascinating that you bring it up this way. As I'm getting to think about it here, there's two options as I see it now. In that reference to The Last Jedi, there's two ways I see this now. Boba Fett could have come out of the Sarlacc pit and gone one of two paths. It's never just one of two paths, but let's just say for the sake of conversation, one of two ways. He could have done what Gaurav suggested, which is, I got my hit list, that's where I'm going. Yes, and that is exactly what could happen. And what you would end up with is an extraordinarily one-dimensional character who's literally just out there like, I will kill all the people who harmed me. Great. And then what? That's the end of the show. Oh, I mean, cool, but like, what do you get at? Like, what happens with a character when all they're doing is going and finding people to kill because they pissed him off or they threw him into a Sarlacc pit? Yeah, I mean, interesting. Oh, you're getting revenge, but what character development really exists there? At least for me, like, there's no dimension there. That's just you got some revengeance. You're going to do this, and maybe there's a redemption arc for you at the end of the show where, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. But then what? This arc, to me, is more of like, he chose the path less taken. He chose the harder path. That's the easier path. He chose the harder path of like, I mean, he was kind of forced into it, but he could have bounced at a couple different opportunities into episode 2 and been like, F this noise. I'm going to do this thing that I'm going to go do. But the reality is, a lot of the people that harmed him are gone. Yep. Like Jabba is dead. Bib Fortuna is dead. All these other characters.
Luke Skywalker's still out there. Still out there. I'm not joking around. I might be in favor of seeing a Boba Fett go after Luke Skywalker's show.
Absolutely. But to me, for me, that this arc feels more like this is the scene in Loki, in the TV show Loki, where they meet King, and when they get to that moment where the multiverse, he's broken the multiverse, and he's like, I don't know what happens next. I knew everything up until this point, and now I don't know what happens next. That's the point. That's where we're at, I think, with Boba. And I love that because we don't know. We know one thing about him that happens next, which is he saved Fennec Shand and helped Din Djarin, and that's it. That's like, we know that piece, but there's not much there, to be honest. You go back and watch that season, there isn't actually a lot there. Like, other than the few actions that happen, there's not a lot of depth there. Like, it's not bad. It's just we don't learn much about Boba other than he survived, he helped because he owed a debt. Debt's paid, he moves on. And him and Fennec get back into Tatooine. That's it. So for me, this is like, yeah, we don't know any of this. We don't know who this person is. We don't know where his mind is at. We see what he's doing, but now we get to learn more about him. Like, who would Boba have been earlier in his life if somehow something could have given him that hard reset? That, like, done. Stop being a bounty hunter for some reason. What would have happened to Boba earlier in his life had that happened? We get to see that now. And that, to me, makes a much more deep and rich character because, like, yeah, we're learning a lot about who he is and how receptive he is to others' teachings and others' ways and things that are happening around him, far more than just the single-minded bounty hunter who just killed people for money and that was the end of it. Like, that's interesting to a point, but like, as badass as Cad Bane was in all of the, Clone Wars stuff, and he was interesting because he had that sort of gunslinger feel. He's still a one-dimensional character. He shows up, he kills people, and he gets money for it. And
That's right.
shenanigans ensue because he's kind of a badass, and you can't just go after him like you would anybody else as a Jedi, because he's actually pretty badass at what he does. But other than that, there's nothing else to him. He still has the one thing that he does, and that's all he does. So I really like this. And Garv, I hope this isn't going to ruin it too much, but I will say this has been talked about on pretty much every social network I've seen, from TikTok to Twitter. The native, or the, sorry, it's not native, sorry, wrong word. The indigenous people, the indigenous inclusion of the Tusken Raiders and their culture, and the nuance that we are seeing in their culture, far more than we've seen from the Tusken Raiders in any other property that has been put out by Lucasfilm or Disney. We're learning so much more about the nuance of their indigenous culture. I find that really fascinating. And one, it's a great representation point. They get to represent indigenous people and the ideas of like what indigenous cultures actually have to offer to people who come with respect and reverence for them, and like, here's who you are. Like, I love that aspect of like getting to see the influence of our indigenous culture on main character, and what could that actually look like when you're not just being selfish. There's also a lot of fan theories about who the main guy is in the Tusken village. There's a lot of fan theories about that. I'll be honest, it would be super geeky if it happened, but I don't think it's likely to actually occur. So do you know the fan theory? Have you heard?
Well, I also know about this theory.
Which one is that?
Darth Vader comic number 4, which if you go, you can pick this up at your local comic book store.
Or Half Price Books. There's some great books.
Or Half Price Book, exactly. There's this really great storyline that's happening at the end of it, where Darth Vader comes upon some Tusken Raiders. And I'm not gonna spoil that. I'm just gonna say that if you go and pick up Darth Vader number 4, and you see the end of this comic book, you might see a nice thing that a lot of fans are expecting will be a big plot point for this band of Tusken Raiders that you run into on Tatooine. And it is a really cool reveal. Just if anybody's looking for it, it's end of game, and Darth Vader number 4. And you can also, although I cannot praise enough going to Half Price Books or going to your local comic book store, it's also available on Amazon if you want to get it, or you can also get it digitally. I got a digital copy of this as well. But it's a really cool ending. So it's the coda, it's the thing that's happening at the end of the story. But I also know about the other big thought about who this could be, and I think they might just roll both of those things together.
I hope they do it. I hope they do it subtly. I really hope they do it subtly. I hope they don't make it a big deal. I hope they do give like a nod at the end. If it's either the one you're referring to or the one that I was referring to. If they touch on it all, the one I'm referring to, I really hope it's sort of at the end of it, or at the end of the series, where geeks look at it and go, "Oh my god, it actually was!" Yeah, and then that's it. And it doesn't need to be anything more than that. It could just be a nod to you see an artifact, or you see a thing and go, and they have a moment of recognition, or the audience gets a moment of recognition, and that's it. And like enough to be like, that's who it is. But clearly, since this character is still a Tusken Raider, that character has chosen what that character wants, and that's all we need. We don't need. You may want more, but the story doesn't require more than that, because we get to see it, and if it's who us geeks might think it could be, it could lead to a lot of other ideas about what people can choose in this galaxy, the path they can choose for themselves. And actually, I think that would be a really good like cross link between what Boba is choosing for himself and what that character, if it's true, what that character chose for themselves. And that can tell you a lot about what characters can do when they actually have a choice, and they have a circumstance in front of them where they feel like the choice is theirs to make and nothing else is going to influence it. That could be really interesting. I think that could be a really powerful moment. And a friend of mine, Michael, just jumped in. Michael, that is reality check, buddy. We had a 4-pack from the last time we were in town. My buddy Mike is from Michael's from Santa Rosa, or Roner Park, where we used to live. So there you go, buddy. I had to have an adult beverage for tonight. Not usually, but just tonight. Oh, and
Well,
there's
hey,
Gaurav.
I'll
Gaurav,
just.
good to see you, buddy.
Hey,
Thank you for
Gaurav,
being
thank
here,
you
buddy.
so much.
Have a
Thanks
good night,
for
man.
being here.
See ya.
So the one thing that I'll say about this is there's a lot of really cool things that because they've pulled in one of these oh my gosh, so many comic book characters from this comic book alone appear in the Book of Boba Fett. And so I would just call that out and say this might be a good primer. The Darth Vader, even if you just read the Darth Vader comic book series 1 through 4, I think that's if you want a really good primer, I think that a lot of what's happened in those comic books is actually going to appear or at least be connected to the Book of Boba Fett. One more thing that I'll just bring up about the Book of Boba Fett is I'd love to talk about the filming and the scenery and the setting and some of the world building. So one thing that I want to say is I don't think I'm spoiling this, but there are some scenes where you see them taking place on Tatooine, and then you see them taking place on Kamino. And I've always loved that. I've always loved when you have these disparate landscapes right next to each other. And famously, it's done by David Lynch in Dune, when Paul is on the planet Arrakis, and he is remembering his home planet. What is it? It's Caladan.
Yes, Caladan.
So he's and of course that's a planet,
it's a water planet
with water planet covered with oceans, and so they're diametrically opposed. And when Paul in the David Lynch, the 1984 Dune, that is also scored by Toto, when he is coming, when the prophecy music is swelling, his eyes become like the ocean. And that's because he's the bridge between these two things, and I love that type of dichotomy in filmmaking. It looks great. I loved seeing that. I love all of the sound design, everything that they're using, from the speeder bikes to the Tusken Raider language. All of that is just so great. It's just like, really, it's like comfort. It's like, I like that type of classic Star Wars sound design. But I think my favorite thing is the mayor that they meet of what is that, Mos Espa. And I don't know if it is Mos Espa or Mos Eisley. I can't remember now which one it is.
It's Mos Espa.
Mos Espa.
Yes.
So they're in Mos Espa, and they meet the mayor, and I loved that scene.
Oh, it was awesome.
Every bit of it. And but one of my favorite things, and again, I'm hoping this isn't a spoiler for people, but the mayor is that alien.
It's called an Ithorian.
Ithorian. They've got 4 throats.
Yes.
And the you see them in the famous cantina scene,
mm-hmm.
and their voice sounds like a coffee grinder, like an old style coffee grinder. And I loved how he had this little I don't know the correct pronoun there. The mayor had this. They exactly. Thank you. I felt like it was not appropriate. So the mayor has this little voice translator that's projecting the voice, and I like all of the underbelly of that. I like the mayor's assistant. I like the Twi'leks that are there. I like all of that elements of the world building, and that's why I've got hope for this show. I think it's got the ingredients there. It's like a cake. No one wants to eat a cake when it's just the egg and the salt and the flour and the butter. I think they've got all the ingredients. It's just that unfortunately we're able to see them all. But I hope within the next 2 episodes they are able to bake this, and I think it could be great.
Hey, you know what? And speaking of the mayor, 2 things. One, they found a way to use the term major domo So I've never heard that used in a TV show ever before. There's only one other time I've ever heard Major Domo actually used in this way, and I absolutely love it. It makes me so happy because he's like, this is the mayor's Major Domo. I'm like, I know what that means. Anyway, I absolutely love that. But fun fact about the Thorians. So they have 4 throats. They actually have the ability, if they decide to become aggressive and fight, that they can kick out sound out of those 4 throats that could literally crack and shake a building. So they could actually fight you by basically like screaming or uttering sound waves out of those side throats that she has, or they, I should say. You're right. They have those like vocabulizers inside of. They can shoot sound waves out of those things. They're really cool. Fun fact for anybody who wants to be a nerd about Star Wars.
Oh yeah,
I'm with you. The world building has been fantastic. I love getting to see Mos Espa, and just I love the zoom in on it and how it looks more like a proper city than like Mos Eisley did. You know, even Mos Eisley is supposed to be another type of city. It looks more like a proper city. We've never actually seen Anchorhead before. So we hear about Anchorhead all the time. We've never really seen it before. Mos Espa looks like a legitimate city with legitimate buildings built in the proper way for the environment that it's in. And I think that's really fascinating. It's like, it feels like a real thing. So I'm with you. I'm excited to see how they're weaving all these little subtle elements into the larger story, because it does make it feel more immersive. It really does.
I'm telling you, I got strong Godfather 2 vibes, and I'm not saying it's going to be that great. I'm just saying it could be coming to pass here.
Michael, actually, it's funny that you asked that question. I don't know about all of the names, but I can tell you, here's a fun, interesting one for you. So if you've seen the movie Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, the big battle culminates on a planet called Scarif at the end of the movie.
I just learned this.
I did too. I just saw this on TikTok. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So Scarif at the end of the movie is where the Empire has these Imperial archives, and that's where they go to. Blah blah. You've seen the movie. If you've seen the movie, you remember. Apparently, the name Scarif came about because Gareth Edwards, the director of the movie, was at they didn't say Starbucks, but was at like a coffee shop getting coffee, and when the person asked for his name, he said kind of quietly Gareth, and the person wrote Scarif because they couldn't understand him. Whatever, Scarif on the cup, and when Gareth got it back and looked at it, and went, "Huh, there's a name." And so they used that name for the planet. So I'm sure there was like some other reasons why these names, like Mos Espa, in the case of Mos Espa has been mentioned in Star Wars like Legends books, pre-Disney purchase a few times. I don't know if we've ever spent much time there, if the stories have ever really gone there, but the name has been mentioned before in movies and TV shows, like as a reference of like Tatooine, like the only places you can really go there are Anchorhead and Mos Espa. Like it's said, but it's a throwaway. Like it's just a line in a movie. So this is the first time we actually get to see that. So the name was already established, but we didn't know anything about it. So this is the first time, like, okay, what would a proper city with a mayor and an actual thing look like? And even more so, what would it look like without a crime lord like Jabba the Hutt ruling everything, or even Bib Fortuna for that matter, ruling everything? What would that look like? And I love that because it actually felt pretty clean and crisp and put together and almost thriving, like kind of thriving to a point of like not feeling seedy, which was really interesting to see. Like people say, oh, Tatooine's crap, you don't go there, blah, blah, blah. And then you see what we've seen so far of Mos Espa outside of some stuff in episode 2, and you're like, huh, well, this doesn't look like what we saw in Mos Eisley, what we were led to believe Tatooine is all about. So that I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like, the Lars family is a stand-up family, and they're living on Tatooine. And as someone who came from actual Tatooine, Modesto, it's not that bad. It's not that bad, and there are parts of Modesto that are like a hive of scum and villainy, but most of the people that are there are good people. And I grew up on not that far away from a lot of that stuff, and dirt farming places, but yeah, I will say that no, that's no dig on Modesto. As someone who was born there, or as Brad Boimler from Star Trek Lower Decks says, Modesto is the moon of San Francisco. So it's got its charm.
It has a charm.
Yeah. Well,
listen.
But I do love all of these planets and the names. I think it's so fun. But yeah, just learning that scare thing too.
It was so cool. Well, listen, we're getting near the end. And I didn't want to leave off the High Republic stuff, but probably a whole other show we should do on High Republic another time. But what I did want to do is this. So the High Republic, if you haven't heard of it, for anyone watching right now or watching later, the High Republic is, you may have heard of it or seen something about it. It's basically it was called Project Luminous. A bunch of authors got together probably 4 or 5 years ago, and they spent a good year, like they spent a large chunk of time in person, and probably a good year to 2 years planning out a whole new era of Star Wars that has never existed before, something that has never been written about. The time period it takes place in is 200 to 300 years. We don't know exactly. 200 to 300 years before the events of Episode 1. So before Anakin was even born as a kid anywhere, or whatever happened, 200 to 300 years before that. And it's considered to basically be like the Gilded Age of the galaxy, or the Golden Age. The Jedi at the height of their power, and by power simply that they're learned, they understand their connection to the Force, they're nuanced, the galaxy is thriving, things are going amazingly well. They do not have the kind of strife or political disruptions or corruption that we see in the current stuff. So what happens? It happens to them. And it's really fascinating to read. So if you have a chance, everyone's got a chance. There's a couple different comic books running, but I would recommend buy the audio version or whatever, or buy the print version. But, oh, sorry, I just sat on my headphones, and that is really uncomfortable. Oh, my God. That hurts a lot. I rolled over them with my chair. So we're going to have to do that. It's going to probably echo a little bit. I apologize. So I can fix my headphones. Because I literally rolled them into my wheel. That's fantastic. What you want to get is this book. It's called The Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. It is the book that kicked off the High Republic. It is amazing. I was going to try to read a line from the book. Basically what happens is, what starts everything off is a hyperspace disaster. And so what I mean by that is, if you don't know anything about Star Wars, it's fine. In Star Wars, even in the current version of Star Wars that we all watch, engineers and people don't really understand that much about hyperspace. They may know enough to how to navigate it, how to use it, but what it actually is, they're still not really sure. And most people believe it's an alternate dimension. It's actually skirting through alternate dimensions that get you from place to place within the galaxy, but they don't really know. And so what happens is somehow a ship is in hyperspace and blows up in hyperspace. It collides with something else in hyperspace. And when it collides with something else, the debris flies out of hyperspace into real space. But because it's essentially like a multi-dimensional thing, it's not like just a path, like a jet stream you're flying through in space. It's like this multi-dimensional path you're kind of flying through. The debris flies out into real space across the entire galaxy, like every part of the galaxy. But it doesn't just come out into real space. It comes out into real space at the speed of light that it was flying at in hyperspace. So when it enters a system, like a star system of some kind, it's moving so fast that within seconds it could travel basically from Pluto to Earth in the matter of 5 minutes. That's how quickly it's moving. And if these items, like big chunks of a ship, collide with a planet, and what we find out is they literally kill everyone, or they destroy the entire planet. It is this galaxy-wide disaster that occurs. And I was going to try to find the line in the book where in the very beginning the thing happens, and I won't try to find it here, but basically there's a line in the book where one of the first Jedi we meet, her name is Avar Kriss. We learn more about her later on, where Avar is Michael, he's taking off. Michael, thanks for being here, buddy. It was good to have you. It's her here right on the front of the book. Her connection to the Force is she sees the Force as a song. So her connection to the Force is she actually feels everyone in the Force through a unique song that she hears in her mind, perceives, and in what we would refer to as synesthesia, where somebody has the condition of they see music as colors, and that's a very well known thing. Pharrell has this. I can't remember. There's another gal who has it too. Anyway, there's a line in the book where this planet called Hetzel is in danger. Chunks are flying at it. They're like, oh my God, everyone's going to die. It's going to be here in 25 minutes. And all of a sudden, over a broadcast wave, they hear Avar Kriss come on and say something to the effect of like, this is Avar Kriss of the Jedi Order. We've received your message. Help us. The Jedi are on their way. And like, that's the whole line. And when you get past everything happened, you read that and you're like I just saying that I had goosebumps. Like you read this in the book and you're like, oh, wow. And then all of this stuff happens. And it's not just all unicorns and rainbows, but this stuff happens that when you read it, you're like, wow. You and I have talked about this before. Obi-Wan says in A New Hope, at one point, 10,000 Jedi or whatever number of Jedi were across the galaxy doing positive things, whatever else. And this is basically, we get to see that. We get to see the Jedi thriving across the entire galaxy, just doing good for people.
Yeah.
But it's
Jedi
not
in their golden era.
Yeah, and it's not without its problems. And the problems, as you can imagine, with the Jedi being so high at where they're at, the problems are really, really tough. They're not just simple, here's an antagonist, drop them in, and bad things happen. It is a very nuanced thing. It's fantastic. You can see half my shelves back here are filled with High Republic novels. There's High Republic, multiple novels. The box on the floor over here is a whole box I bought just to fill up with my Star Wars, my High Republic comics that have come out so far this year. It's like some of them are in a box over here. Most of them are now in this box. This is just pretty much all High Republic comics just from this last year. So and manga and the Star Wars and Disney released their first manga ever, which is called The Path of Light, I think. It's amazing. So I bring this up as we'll do another episode on the High Republic. We'll get you some books, but check it out. It is fantastic. The stories they're telling are just amazing, and they're some of the most engaging, great character development, world development, planets and peoples we have never met before or seen, describing various details, and heart-wrenching. Like the highs are high and the lows are low. And man, one of the books I walked away with, and I had seen people post on Twitter tagging the author saying, so-and-so, you know what you did. And I'm like, oh God, what? And I read the book and I got to the end and I'm like, oh, like you walk away from the book just like, I know the story, as you've helped me understand, stories sometimes just have to conclude a way that they conclude. But when you get to the end of the story, you're like, damn, I mean, I get it, but damn. And it was fantastic. So I would say if you have an opportunity and if you watch this show or you're catching this show or you're slightly interested in Star Wars, but you're not really where to start, you've watched some of the movies and you're like, yeah, they're interesting, I'm not sure. What I would suggest, comics, there's tons of them. If you want to get into comics, I can show you some of the easy comics to get into. But this book right here, it's a super easy read, and you will be introduced to the Jedi at their highest, and it is fantastic. And you get to get introduced to all the antagonists right away, but in a subtle way. It is amazing. Go check it out. Read this book. It'll make you... If it doesn't make you interested in Star Wars even a little bit, then Star Wars is probably not for you. And that's okay. It's all good not to be interested in that. That's fine. All right. There's my plug for the High Republic.
I think that's awesome. There was also Jeff, and maybe we can add the link to the description of today's episode. There's a really great check-in with all of the authors that have been contributing in the annual. They had a big kind of anniversary with all of the authors that have been building up the High Republic storyline. It's 11 minutes long, but it's great. And it's really great to kind of see these authors, the people that are kind of building out this storyline. Jeff, I know that we are at the end of time, but I wanted to ask this question because I feel like this is the only time we can ask it is... did you get any Star Wars stuff for Christmas?
Did I? I don't know if I did. I don't think I actually did, to be honest. Well, my wife and I had bought ourselves electric scooters a couple months ago, and that was our gift. That was our gift to each other. So
that's really cool.
That was all I got this time. Yeah, that's all I got this time around.
That is really cool. I will say I have my little Din Djarin with Baby Yoda pop here. I got this. I got gifts just for the podcast.
Nice.
So yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I just saw Lindsay's post a second ago asking for a link to the book. And Lindsay, I am going to drop it for you in an Amazon link for you into the chat right now. You can go pick that up. That is a really long link. I apologize, but it's Star Wars: The Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. You'll find it on there.
I love that title.
Yeah,
love that title.
It is like the perfect book, the perfect title, and perfect artwork. Like they've done the artwork on these things so well. And then from there, the books. I mean, just pick up the comic books, and they will tell you they fill in the other gaps. The novels obviously like have time jumps, like weeks or months between them, and then the comics help fill in what's happening between them in a really, really good way. It's fantastic. It is absolutely fantastic. Right on. Well, we are at the end of the show tonight. This has been a really good episode to come back to. Ryan, it was awesome, dude. I know we're going to be back to work next week. We still have a couple more days off, which is fantastic.
Yep.
But we'll be back next week and to work, but we'll be back next Thursday for another show. If you haven't already liked the video, please hit the little thumbs up down below. We really appreciate it. Or subscribe. Lindsay, thank you for your subscription earlier. I saw that. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Everyone else, have a wonderful night, and we will catch you all pretty soon.
Right on. Thanks everybody for showing up, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Cheers. Woo!
Bye everybody.